Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Raymond, and I'm the Membership and Communications Manager here at KVCOG. And I'm just going to start us off this morning with a few housekeeping tips. I know we're all really familiar with Zoom these days, but you may find at the beginning of this meeting, it's easiest to view everything today in speaker view, as we will also be sharing a screen for most of the presentation. But of course, that is your preference. We'll also ask everyone to mute for the beginning here, and then there will be an opportunity to have you chime in later on in the session, and we'll remind folks how to do that as we get to that point. And to kick us off today, we have KVCOG's new Executive Director, Ulla Amundsen, to say hello and welcome you all more officially to the presentation.
Good morning. Again, thank you, Kate, for that introduction. My name is Ulla Amundsen, and I'm the new Executive Director. I started in early January, and it's been a really exciting opportunity. And it's good to see so many people interested in talking about smart growth on a snowy day in February. This is a little bit of a kind of a reintroduction of KVCOG to the community. I'm new, but I'm not the only new staff person at KVCOG. We have a lot of new staff with a lot of fresh ideas about how to help our communities succeed, how to help businesses succeed, how to think regionally. It's a really exciting time here. We're here to help communities and businesses try to make their way through during these unsettling times with the pandemic. And then also, hopefully once the pandemic is resolved, to figure out what the new normal is looking like. I come basically with a diverse background with over 30 years of experience working for state government, the federal government, the private sector, and NGOs. I've managed revolving programs and done a lot of regional planning around the country, and moved back to Maine about 5 years ago. And it's been really interesting to see what has changed. I grew up in Maine and left for about 25 years. And, Maine, some parts of Maine changed and some parts, haven't. And why is that? I think the KVCOG region is incredibly diverse, has a tremendous a lot of potential. And I'm really excited to, again, work with all of you in thinking about the future. And one of the things, that we're going to be, talking about in the coming months is, revising our CEDS plan. And this is a really exciting opportunity to engage with people and think about, our economic future together. And with that, I'd like to introduce kind of our relatively new head of community and economic development, Jeff Snedden, and he will launch us off into talking about CEDS.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is a first of, as Ulla said, we've had regional meetings in the past on a quarterly basis. Some of you on the attending today may have been part of that. We'd like to welcome others to, as we go forward, we'll have quarterly meetings of regional importance and also a way to network once we get to be back in person or through chat, I guess, to be able to network and identify potential collaborative opportunities. But today is a quick update on the CEDS 5-year plan. It's 2017 to 2022 current plan. We need to do an update. It's an update of the plan, not essentially starting it from scratch. So I'm gonna briefly talk about that, then go right into GrowSmart and how they work together. Next slide, please. So what is a CEDS? Well, it's just what it sounds like. It's a strategy-driven plan for economic development. It's 5 years, so it's a longer-term plan. And we all work together to identify opportunities, quality of place, quality of life. And it's essentially not just a document, it's a locally based, regionally driven planning process. And that's kind of the value of what this process is. We bring together a diverse set of partners to look at ways to generate new jobs, create economic prosperity and economic opportunities. Next slide, please. What are the components? Well, it's just like any other strategic plan. Summary background. What is the, I call it a snapshot of the economic environment. And you dig a little bit deeper. What are the SWOT analysis? People familiar with that, strengths, weaknesses. And I put up vulnerabilities down. I don't think a lot of people think of vulnerability. But that's more when it relates to resilience, and we'll talk a little bit about resilience later. So again, once we do that, we look at the SWOT analysis. Next slide. That's looking at the environment, and then essentially you take action. So we need to look at what is the strategic direction that the region wants to go in or continue in, because this is an update. So we look at our vision statement, we look at our goals and objectives, determine if that's the same direction, if there's some additional opportunities, and then you put the action plan together. What's the implementation? You know, the strategies, tactics to accomplish the identified goals and objectives that we put together. And then, as with any good plan, you're going to have metrics. And with that, we have an evaluation framework. And somebody said this one time, how do you know when you've arrived? How do you know when you got there? So you've got to have some sort of measurement tools. And this is to evaluate the implementation and the impact of the CEDS that we've all worked together and we've implemented. So it's again, there's one more component that back in 2015, 2016, they actually updated the CEDS guidelines, and they've added a new component, and it's called economic resilience. Next slide, please. And I'm sure you've all heard the word resilience. I'm sure you're going to hear more of it. I look at it as another word for sustainability, durability, endurance. But for our purpose, we're looking at economic resilience. So we're going to use this definition I've got here. It's the ability of a region or community or organization, I think, to anticipate, withstand, and bounce back from any type of a shock, disruption, or stressor. So those shocks can be natural disasters, hazards, ice storms, power outages, kind of convenient today. Also man-made economic disruptions, such as the closing of a large employer, like a mill or a tannery, or a decline of an important industry, maybe the paper industry. Also changes in the workforce can disrupt us. We've got an aging out workforce population. We've got a shortage of entry-level workforce, and then a shift in the population trend, such as an aging population. We've got some out-migration of our youth, and we have an in-migration of retirees and new Mainers. So you've got to look at all these different elements, and how do we incorporate these changes and turn these vulnerabilities and weaknesses into opportunities. And that's what the planning process is all about. We all sit down together, we work through this. Once the plan is put into place, it can be used for other plans, it can be used for funding opportunities. It's a demonstration that we are working together. We do have regional opportunities, but part of this is the local and regional level, because if you look at the region, it's made up of localities. So it's not always just explicitly high level region. We go back down into the local level. And I think I will give it here, the CEDS website, just for everybody. It's on our KVCOG website, so it's kvcog.org. You go down to flag municipal services, go down to economic development, and you'll see the link. And I think Kate's going to put that in the chat, but that's where you can see our current CEDS. And essentially, that's what we're going to be doing. You're going to see, I've got one more slide here, and I'll finish up here. What's the process that we're going to do? I'm going to reestablish the CEDS strategy committee. Those of you that want to be part of this, please send me an email. We're going to have the big regional meetings, but this is more of a strategic work group to make sure that the CEDS gets put together and submitted to the Economic Development Administration. We're going to utilize the upgraded demographics and local market information to review our SWOT. We're going to review the document for activities and current projects that need to be ongoing, that we need to transfer to the new plan, and obviously look at what's been completed or no longer relevant and take those out of the plan. And then we're going to identify new opportunities, new goals, add any goals and objectives that at this point going forward for the next 5 years that we feel is important. And then we submit it to the Economic Development Administration in March of 2022. So that's what the next 14 months are going to look like. You're going to hear a lot more about this. But that concludes my update. As again, you'll hear more about that. But one of the things I want to let everybody know is one of the missions that KVCOG is involved is we're a regional convener. We provide access to resources and collaborative opportunities, which is the importance of being a member of KVCOG and working with us in our communities, which is why we've invited Nancy Smith, Executive Director of GrowSmart, to speak to us today about new programs that are going to benefit us at the local and regional level. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. We're going to be talking this morning about community, about your community, and the value that smart growth can bring to it. Jeff mentioned in his presentation the importance of population and workforce for an economic plan, and certainly the connection is clear. Whatever we do, it's got to be about people. I'll note too that I am coming in from Monmouth. Monmouth is a member of KVCOG, and we've made great use of their services in the past. So I want to start with a simple question. How are you? We are 11 months into a pandemic that last March we thought was going to last a couple of weeks. We now live our lives on computer monitors and with masked conversations. We think the end is in sight, and meanwhile, still, here we are. I want this webinar to be as personal as possible, and so I've resisted the urge to provide slides, though they do provide a lot of value. If we were at a meeting, I would absolutely have slides on a screen behind me or beside me to illustrate my points and to give you something to look at besides me. But because so many of us, I Zoom all day. I think my record so far is 6 Zoom meetings in one day, but there's at least 1 or 2. I decided to keep this as conversational as possible. And as I'm speaking with you about programs and resources, I'll ask Kate Raymond of KVCOG to drop a link in the chat so that you all can either click on it later or can click on it while we're talking and go from there. I want to start by asking a question. And this is a question that Kate, besides the how are you, Kate put out there in an email on Friday for those who had registered by that date. Why do you choose to live and work where you are? So in the chat, if you want to give a quick, how are you doing? And then why do you choose to live and work where you are? When Kate sent this email out late last week, we got a couple of responses from a seasonal visitor. We heard that she enjoyed being connected to the outdoors with an opportunity to make a living, and that there was a terrific sense of community, a sense of belonging. For someone else, it was an opportunity to come home, a combination of the right job, finding a house that was on budget, and the school system. The value of the school system was very important. And then another was a person who chose to stay here, and they love the area and the community that they care deeply about. A final one is from a veteran who said, I settled back home with my family after exploring the world, was glad to be in a less populated area of the state. And I love the way that he ended this comment. He said, Maine is my home, and I have more of Maine to explore. And I think, honestly, that's the beauty of our state, is we love where we are, but Maine is so big and so diverse that we all have plenty that we can explore there. Are there other conversations in the chat? Kate, are others adding to this conversation, or do folks want to chime in live and in person on Zoom?
I haven't seen any other come in the chat yet. Please make sure if you're chatting to direct it to everyone or to myself. I know if you've directed it to Nancy, I know she's not specifically looking at her chat. So you can also feel free to unmute yourself and say a few words. That mute and the video should be at the bottom of your screen to the left.
Although I wonder how many people thought it's a webinar, I don't have to be on screen. I'm not gonna get dressed yet.
Here we go. A couple people saying my comment was already read, but how am I doing? COVID exhaustion.
Yeah.
And someone else, we love living close to the Maine wilderness. And one more comment, small towns allow more participation in planning local events.
Oh, I like that. So again, when we talk about smart growth, I'll be talking about land use, but it's got to come back to people or it's irrelevant. And I think that we're seeing that in these comments. And as for me in Monmouth, I've lived in Monmouth, I think since about 1995, first on a farm, and now I live in town. But it was a job in Lincoln, Maine that brought me from where I grew up in Connecticut. And I loved what you're hearing consistently. There was a small town in Lincoln, and it was adjacent to the outdoors. I came to Maine as a forester, so I got to go to work in the outdoors every day. But that's the connection that we've got. And in these conversations, I think the important thing to know is that these things that that bring us here and keep us here, they have their roots in smart growth. Downtowns that are truly authentic, open space, farms, working woods, and working waterfronts. For these areas, or for some areas, there's even a choice in how you get around, to have options where you aren't required to have one car or even more in a household. Through Maine's history, the mountains, the lakes, streams, the ocean front, everything that we're loving, the pastures in the valley, we could enjoy and appreciate those and make a living. Now, I think we need to be more deliberate to maintain that balance. So GrowSmart Maine's mission is to build lasting prosperity without sacrificing the quality of life that defines Maine. We help communities manage change. For some, it's too little growth. For some, it's too much. In some places, it's growth in places that diminishes what you love about this place. There are 10 smart growth principles that fit any community of any size. And you can see the link there and look at them. There are 10, but I'll hit some highlights as you're viewing that if you choose to. Create walkable neighborhoods for all of the benefits in wellness, connection, the economic and environmental values of walkability, of not having to get into a vehicle when you need to accomplish your daily living. Fostering distinctive, attractive homes with a strong sense of place. This is Maine's calling card. We don't need to recreate these places because they're still here. Preserving open space and farmland in critical environmental areas, and then strengthening and directing development towards existing communities. This is also known as resisting sprawl, which is growth allowed where it does not fulfill the long-term goals of the community, that loss of place, as well as increasing municipal budgets. Making development decisions predictable, fair, and cost-effective, and encouraging community and stakeholder collaboration in development decisions. I think those two go right in tandem. Our goal is to ensure that future generations can prosper and choose to call Maine home. Smart growth gives the tools to do that. Now, GrowSmart does our work through events, advocacy, and community engagement. My conversation with all of you today is about the community engagement, the community programs that we have that can help you manage growth and change. Each of these has a different level of effort. It can be adapted for an interested community, and it has a cost as well as potential funding sources. The three programs are Making Headway in Your Community, Energy Efficiency Community Campaign, and Housing Choices for a Well-Rounded Community. So Kate will put up a link to Making Headway on Your Community from our website. This is an event or a program comprised of 3 public events. There's a conversation, there's a friendly competition with $1,000 at stake, and there's a celebration. At least one project and stronger connections to each other and to resources are the outcomes over a course of about 9 months. So we have at least one tangible project, that small success to build on. The value of a small, quick process is you can prove the naysayers wrong. Every town has naysayers. You've got the folks that'll tell you it'll never work. If you can show them, yeah, but we did this, it's a great place to build from. It also gives courage to those who are doing the hard work. You to yourself can say, we're never going to make it. But look, we did this, we can keep moving. You come away with a better understanding of your neighbors, and you find what you have in, finding what you have in common is a powerful place to start on heavy lifts. We did that this morning. Whether you're from away, grew up here and returned, or chose to stay here, we value the same things about our hometowns. That's powerful. When I'm talking about community, it can be a neighborhood, it can be a town, or it can be a region of a couple of towns. In all of those scenarios, it began with Jay, Livermore Falls. We moved to Bucksport and introduced this program 2 weeks after the mill closure was announced. We went down east, we went to Western Maine mill towns and to the Katahdin region. And most recently, we've been in Sanford in a neighborhood. What inspires me about making headway in your community is that it works. The projects have been really interesting. There was a playground built beside a ball field in Eastport, where they identified that their kids were the most important thing that they all valued, and the younger siblings needed a place to play while their brothers and sisters were on the ball field. In Wilton, it was an outdoor program space beside the library that they made by installing a fence for safety. Katahdin region was fabulous. They put together 6 competitors for this $1,000 we had. Every project there had to connect with what they love about the place and connect the 3 communities. One of my favorites of those 6 was hosted by the Millinocket Memorial Library, and they did the Katahdin Story Booth project. This was a community initiative to record and share the personal stories of the people who live, work, and shaped the Katahdin region as we know it. Lebec also asked, do we really have to choose one, or can we do all 3? They did Beautify Water Street, and this included 16 fish-shaped wayfinding signs painted by adults and kids. What was brilliant about this is these were artwork that happened to point to businesses, and because it's artwork, it bypassed the Maine DOT rules on where you're allowed to put signage. They did Arts in the Park, where they stabilized the bandstand at Stockford Park, and they added a mural highlighting local interest. And then Plastic-Free Lebec. Over 30 local stores and restaurants accepted the challenge to use biodegradable containers for takeout and eliminate plastic bottles. Shops, including the local IGA, encouraged customers to use reusable bags. A plastic-free Lebec window sticker was provided to all businesses, and reusable bags were sold as a fundraiser. In Sanford, we worked in a neighborhood where the school was going to be closed, and the focus was on the reuse of that school. The winning projects, again, 2 that were chosen, were a combination of the Lafayette Children's Crosswalk and distinctive street sign toppers that designated the east side. Unexpected results, in addition to those, were that Public Works decided we'll add lighted crosswalk signs, and potholes were filled and street painting was freshened in the area. An art show of the children's drawings of what they would like to see as a New Year's for the school was displayed at City Hall, and then also part of a traveling show displayed at local businesses and community gathering places, clearly before the pandemic. What really happened in Sanford was that the sense of pride in this neighborhood was affirmed as they're considering what the future of that building could be. Making headway in your community is a starting point. It's a way to connect with smart growth as you lean into the big work ahead. In Eastport, they focused on open space for recreation. In Sanford, it was that sense of place while you're talking about the redevelopment of existing buildings. In Lebec, it was about sustainable economy on the bay. These are all smart growth outcomes. Reports for each of these programs are online, and you're welcome to look at them. Most of them, I think, focus on what the projects are, but it's well worth taking a look to see if this is something that you might be interested in doing. The next program I want to outline for you is the Energy Efficiency Community Campaign. Feel more comfortable now, reduce home energy expenses, and save money for the long term. This is a program that we launched right before the pandemic. And so we've been reconfiguring it and are getting ready to relaunch it now. When this morning, when we talked about why we live here even on a winter day like this, and you said maybe that winter is one of your top reasons to be here, it can also be a cold, remote, wild, beautiful place. Maine sends $4.6 billion out of state each year in heating costs. The climate implications for our dependence on fossil fuels are evident. So how often can you save money, make your family more comfortable, and help the planet all at the same time? This program is an adaptation of the Island Institute's Energy Efficiency Gap report. And it begins with an informational workshop to highlight resources available in Maine. And the outcome of the workshop is that you have resources to do improvements in your own home. But it can lead, and we hope that it leads, to a campaign to weatherize and improve energy efficiency in at least 25 homes in your community. We provide information for businesses and municipal properties as well. Our hope is that the core group in your community that works with this program will be energized and keep going on other projects. This program, for this program, we're lucky to have 2 AmeriCorps members who will be leading the charge. Grace Sherman and Phoebe Little will be with us for all of 2021. They're beginning in Windham in Biddeford, where we had launched the initial workshops and we're preparing for the boots on the ground work when the pandemic hit. So I want to turn this over to Grace for a minute to say hello, and then she'll introduce Phoebe for the same, and then we'll come back to me. So Grace, are you there and ready to say hi?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm having internet issues, so my camera's off. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But so I'm Grace, and I am the AmeriCorps member that's going to be working with GrowSmart Maine this year. I just graduated from Wheaton College with a degree in biology, and I'm really excited to be working in the community and involving the community in this initiative. Phoebe couldn't make it today because of internet issues as well. So I will give her a quick little introduction. She just graduated from Smith College, I believe, and she's going to be working with me on this initiative as well. And if anybody has information and questions and whatnot, the email for GrowSmart Maine is on the website, and I'm going to be manning that sort of information for this campaign, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, thank you, Grace. Yeah, the internet, I'm happy as many of us still have it as we do, so we'll keep going. So we are looking for more communities for the Energy Efficiency Community Campaign, and you've heard my definition of community. We're going to continue to adapt to COVID in thinking through how to do the boots on the ground components of this work. And if you're interested, we'll be happy to hear from you, and we'll connect you with Grace. The final program I want to share with you is one that we are about to launch. This is Housing Choices for a Well-Rounded Community. As with the Energy Efficiency Community Campaign, we begin with an informative workshop that can lead to boots on the ground technical assistance. Every town has plans of some sort for its future: economic growth strategies, community development plans, and that perhaps have thoughts about Main Street, arts and culture, supporting farms and other small businesses. These are important. You heard Jeff speak about your regional 5-year plan. Wicked important. I have found that it's easy for us to forget to tie these plans solidly back to housing, which is the connector between community and the economy. What does your housing stock look like now? Beyond the age and the size of the housing and its energy efficiency, where is it located? Is a car required to accomplish daily tasks? Are there places to safely enjoy the outdoors nearby? Who can live in the housing that's available? Families with young children, elders looking to downsize from their family homes, those looking to start out with their first homes. This mix of families is what builds community. Towns across Maine are seeing an influx of Mainers returning home, seasonal visitors choosing to stay, and people who are new to Maine as they are seeking quieter places to live, work, and play. Are you ready for them? When they come, they will come. This is an opportunity, this workshop and this program, to explore the many proven economic and social benefits of the well-rounded community that includes a diverse population in income, age and stage of life, abilities, race and ethnicity, and other factors. Does your current housing stock match the market? The people that you want to come to your town, what are they looking for? This process requires a concerted effort to match the housing choices with the preferences of residents and potential residents. Participants in this process will learn ways in which the choices in housing can be added to a town's housing mix, and how appropriately placed higher density housing can be an asset that adds social value and net positive fiscal value to the municipality. If you think of a toolbox, not all tools fit each community, but we can help you highlight and strategize where you should proceed. The outcomes of this work will be a stronger community fabric, a more stable tax base, greater economic opportunity, and with good planning, appropriate conservation of working and natural open spaces. If you're interested in learning about this, again, you've got the contact information, reach out to us. We are preparing this spring to have our first workshop, informational workshop, and looking for a place that might be interested in hosting. So be in touch through Jeff or through Kate. So these are our formal community programs. We have additional resources on our website. There are materials that you can read online or print out to cover a variety of challenges that communities might face. We also have a YouTube channel. You can subscribe to it, and we're very active on social media. You can follow us, connect to us, and learn what we're up to. And we're willing to share and repost what you have to say as well to get the word out. Beyond the community engagement, GrowSmart in Maine also does events and advocacy. And Kate will share with you a link that goes directly to our public advocacy. That is another fascinating, one of my favorite components of what we do. As a part of, and within that webpage on public policy, you'll see a description of the Maine Alliance of Smart Growth. This is a network brought together by GrowSmart Maine with a proven interest in smart growth. We advocate for significant policy changes related to smart growth and its value to Maine communities. But it also connects organizations and communities with where those smart growth values overlap, creating a stronger network across the state. This coordination often results in more resources and better growth outcomes across the state. Every member of GrowSmart Maine is a member of the Alliance, and our steering committee includes AARP in Maine, CEI, Maine Preservation, the Maine Downtown Center, and the cities of Hallowell and Lewiston. I do hope you'll consider getting involved there as well. So I'm going to close by circling back to smart growth and then open this up to a conversation. Smart growth provides choices in how communities respond to growth and change. You'll see a link to what the 10 principles are, and I hope that you've seen why they matter. So in opening this up to conversation to see what you'd like to talk about further, I'd invite you to join GrowSmart Maine. You can join as an individual, as a business, as a municipality, or a nonprofit, and continue to connect with us in that way. So those are my remarks to get us started, and I'd love to have a conversation moving forward. And I think, Kate, are you going to talk with us about how to do that over Zoom?
Absolutely. As we said before, you're welcome to turn your camera on and mute yourself if you'd like to have, if you have a question for either Nancy or Jeff. And you can also utilize the chat feature. Just direct that to everyone, if you wouldn't mind, so that we can all see your question. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but we are recording, so and we will be posting this video up to our social media after the fact. So if you don't want to share your video, that's perfectly fine. You can just unmute yourself as well.
I'd like to make a quick comment. I think, Nancy, I like with your comments and the well-roundedness of the programs, because one of the things that I see when it comes to economic development is sometimes we compartmentalize things or silo them. And it really is transportation, childcare, and housing, because you need that in order to help folks get to work and to build those economies. When we, as Jim Dingle, when you have companies come into First Park, right, you're going to need these type of supportive services. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because those three elements always need to be part of our planning, definitely at the local and regional level.
Oh, absolutely.
And Jim just asked, is there a regional housing study that would be part of CEDS or a small growth strategy, a smart growth strategy.
What do you want to take that, Nancy? Then I'll follow up.
I would say I hope so. I don't know the specifics of CEDS, but in the presentation and what I've been with GrowSmart Maine almost 11 years now. I think that the regional planning commissions and COGs like KVCOG are embedded in smart growth. It really is about how to manage growth in a way that meets the immediate as well as the long-term work. So in listening to the outline, it certainly sounds like smart growth is embedded in the plans that you have ahead.
And I would comment, I think absolutely, Jim, because part of it is as we go forward, we do have an aging housing stock. We do have limitations in workforce housing. We're having aging out of populations. Where are they going to live? So that in itself has a number of different elements that I think impact community development at the local and regional level. So I would say it's definitely, if it's not part of it, then it's going to be continued as we move forward. Yeah.
And Will first. Will just commented the Augusta Housing Authority recently commissioned a housing study, but it's primarily focused on Augusta rather than the region more broadly. And Robin stated a regional housing study was recently conducted in the Kennebec Valley, Augusta area. And I'm not sure about others.
What about housing in the, I'd say in the more rural towns? I live in Monmouth. You all, I think I know there was Oakland, China. What's the housing situation there these days? And are you all seeing the influx of people who are moving to Maine for various reasons, but in response to the pandemic? I have new neighbors that came because of the pandemic, grew up in Maine and returned.
This is Erica LaCroix. I work in Winslow, but I live in Oakland. So, I came back here. I've been away for 30 years. I grew up in Mount Vernon. And I thought coming home, I would find more affordable housing than what I had in Virginia and Georgia. But with the pandemic, of course, the prices were skyrocketing.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I don't live in Winslow, which ideally I should, is because you can't find good housing there that you can actually afford to live in. And I don't want to be classist about it, but I don't want to live in a house that looks like a dump that I already paid, big money for. So my issue was finding a home that I could afford and didn't then have to put a bunch of money into to renovate before I felt happy there. And Winslow doesn't have a whole lot of that inventory. The nice homes that you don't have to put anything into are up in the $300,000 to $400,000 range and above. So working class families coming in, that's hard. That's a hard sell. When you look at a $150,000 house, it's probably going to be right in town, no yard, which some people like. They like to be in town because, again, we go back to the walkable community things, but the housing stock is old. So it's not, a lot of it isn't very attractive. And my counsel, and I put this in the chat, so I'm sorry, but my counsel is banking on the housing being low cost and our schools being great. When I look at realtor.com or Zillow or Trulia or any of the big realty sites, and one of the big things that comes up is, what are your schools? Winslow is ranked a 4 out of 10. So they may have a great reputation locally, but if I'm coming from out of state, I've got nothing else to base it on. So how do I redirect my counsel to try and make them understand that we need to start putting some money into beautifying our community, getting that housing stock up, attractive homes that don't cost an arm and a leg? That's the kind of thing that I'm looking at.
I think that's a great point, Erica, and Jim chimed in as well, that what I take from Jim's note in the chat was cost of living goes beyond the cost of housing. And, he mentioned the cost of a tank of oil, which goes back to why we're leading off again with the energy efficiency community campaign. How do you keep the great houses so that we can stay in them? And Erica, I loved your comments, because when we say affordable housing, people think different things. And sometimes one of the barriers to housing is people saying, I don't want affordable housing, because of their perception of what that means. And even the language has evolved where now we talk about workforce housing. But you're right, if the average or the mean house costs $300,000, and you want that diversity in your community that makes it this hometown, there have to be ways to adapt. So with the Housing Choices program, you can look at things like, do your ordinances allow someone who's in a beautiful grand old house to turn it into 2 units, one they live in and one that they could rent out? This might be considered multi-family. It might also be an accessory dwelling unit. If you have people who have raised their kids and they're still in the 4-bedroom home, they don't want to move because they love that place. And at least around here, and I'm sure in your towns, they inherited that from their parents, where they grew up. One of the ways they can stay there, which is what they want, and stay there safely, and you can address the problem, is to allow for them to subdivide the building. And it needs to be done carefully, and you need to be thoughtful. That's why there's zoning and ordinances. But being able to allow these big houses to be for more than one household. And with the accessory dwelling units, we have on the resources link that Kate shared with you, ways to do accessory dwelling units. And the classic story of seniors that are living in a large home can subdivide so that their grandson can live with them, and keep it the safety and the family component of that, as well as the affordability. It can also be done strictly so that it's a rental. These are tools that you can use. Another fascinating thing to watch, I've only been aware of it for maybe 3 years, is tiny houses and the options that those provide as an accessory dwelling unit, as a primary living unit. Through the pandemic, I was reading an article yesterday, they're being used as offices when people decide after a year of this, maybe a little bit more space for the family is worthwhile. Do your town ordinances allow for this kind of adaptation, keeping in mind the quality of life that you want to keep there? So again, there are tools to work with this, and this is the kind of conversation I was hoping for.
Excellent.
We have a couple more comments that have come in the chat as well. Jim continuing the conversation, saying First Park is under pressure from developers who would like to build housing, and they're open to that possibility, which they wouldn't have been 20 years ago. So I do think that continues that conversation.
Jim, you might want to explore, and perhaps you already have, what's happening in Falmouth on their Route 1 redevelopment. Route 1 in Falmouth is what, 95% retail. They are bringing in housing and office space, but to actively bring in workforce housing within what had been considered another use, adapts to the changing market, and also allows in a weird way to create that community and create neighborhood where we never thought it would be. So I know that, I don't honestly remember if Monmouth is a member of First Park or not, but I know I've been hearing about it for years, and ways to keep it a vibrant or create a vibrant space there are worth exploring.
And Will also linked in a study that put together some regional data for economic forecasting. So that's in the chat as well.
And Jim, I like your comment about the live and work. And one of the things that I've seen in the past, base redevelopments have done that, where it started out organically, but then it became its own little village. So you never know if First Park might, and that spurs economic growth. You may need now a little store or a gas station. So there's always those kind of, and it becomes its own little village with walkways. And so that's encouraging to hear that you guys are starting to think that way.
It brings to mind, because you're talking about such a significant change, it brings to mind again that two of the smart growth principles are brought up. One was predictable, reasonable, effective regulatory environment, and making sure that community and the developer are working together on a process. That I was thinking as you were talking about that as a significant change, there may be pushback, and it may come from surprising places. And the earlier that you can go public and talk about what this change is that's being proposed and why and what the benefits are, the stronger it's going to be. I know you know that. I just felt the need to restate. A lot of the friction comes when people feel they were left out of the process, and it's, I think, one of the more essential of the smart growth principles we have.
I have a question, Nancy.
Sure.
So while we expect towns and school districts to fund almost exclusively through property tax, what sort of impact does that have on patterns of development, and how can we sort of amend some of those funding issues so that we can both have things that are adequately funded, like municipal programs and school systems, while also providing need for, you know, lower to middle income housing?
Huge question, and you're coming into the advocacy part of the work that I do, or the GrowSmart does. The fact that education is funded through property tax is an issue, and we need to address that. And it's a percentage. I'm sure you're all aware of the balance of state and municipal funding that's supposed to give that level of local decision making for how much you want to invest and what you want in your schools versus the state funding there to ensure some level of consistency. But that, I think, combined with one of the issues that I'm hoping to address this year in the legislature, at least as a starting point, is the mill rate differential for the service center communities versus the areas around them. And the fact that our larger cities, at mama scale, the larger cities have populations that require services. They have the nonprofits and government agencies that do those services. The mill rate or the property taxes paid is often higher there than it is in the outlying areas. And that can push housing out to the suburbs. And again, if it's done well and growth is managed in a way with that short term and long term, then it has value. But we do risk, and we're seeing it, that those service center communities, it just keeps spiraling. The mill rate continues to go up versus the areas. What I have found interesting is we've known that that's an issue for cities versus suburbs, but really beginning to identify it a couple of years ago in the rural parts of the state, in the unorganized territories, where they have the rural hubs versus the unorganized territories near them. As an example, last I checked, the mill rate differential between Millinocket and the UT, the unorganized territory adjacent to it, was a 30 mill rate versus a 9 mill rate. Now that is because Millinocket is providing the services for people who live and occasionally work in the UT. One of the bills that I'm working through the legislature is how do we address that? Part of it is education funding, because that's always going to be a piece of it. But there's also some things about the way that growth is happening in the state that we need to address. So that's what comes to mind when you mention this disconnect between funding for education versus how growth is happening. Did I capture that well, Will?
Yeah, everything I understand about this problem, it's a small pile of sands compared to a giant dune of what I don't comprehend. So thank you for that, Nancy.
All right, that's all right.
Got a couple more comments coming in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I can read them out if you'd like. Rachel says adaptive changes are needed in a lot of towns. I've been researching accessory dwelling units for my town of Gray. We have hurdles in subsurface wastewater standards. It occurs to me that it could be overcome in zoning a tiny house community as multi-unit dwellings. Also, gray wastewater could be diverted from septic systems to increase capacity for black water.
And there are 2 bills in the legislature. They're not yet printed, so I have bill titles and I'm talking with the sponsors. But one has to do with ADUs to, honestly, I'm not sure what it does yet, but it's got them in the title, so I'm tracking. And then another one, I believe the intent is to allow tiny houses to either be second homes or primary homes. But it comes back to inviting towns to consider these as legitimate ways to do workforce housing, affordable housing, housing options for people. Again, as that way to invite in as many people as you can into your community.
And continuing on, Christina says, quality affordable workforce housing in Skowhegan is lacking, as are move-in ready retail spaces. We're gearing up to conduct a real estate barriers analysis and test creative solutions and incentives for incremental small-scale development. Redevelopment of second floor spaces in our historic downtown has little to no ROI, so our property owners don't invest. It's a problem that many of our rural historic downtowns must address.
That's fascinating. They're finding, is there simply no market for housing on the second floors in those towns? I'm picturing Skowhegan and thinking what a fabulous place that would be to live. So I guess I'm surprised that there's no ROI or not a sufficient enough ROI. That brings to mind another, actually a public hearing that was supposed to happen this morning, but isn't because of the weather, is extending the sunset on the historic rehab tax credit, which has an added component for low-income housing. And of course, Maine has its own low-income housing tax credit now. And I wonder if folks are exploring those as options to redevelop upper floors.
Nancy, this is Christina from Skowhegan. I can elaborate a little bit more. We just got done working with the National Main Street Center on a entrepreneurial ecosystems report, basically where we assessed what's holding our entrepreneurial ecosystem back and where our gaps are. And so one of the reports came back, or one of the items from the report came back, that we were lacking in housing, and that the obvious place would be to redevelop those second floors. But we had one of our property owners say that even if he could find people to go in there, which there are people yearning for great places downtown, it just isn't worth the cost of redeveloping the place. The second floors in Skowhegan are in terrible shape right now. So that's unfortunately the stance that a lot of our property owners are taking at the moment. So I do know that there was one property owner a couple of years ago who reached out, who did a market analysis and never got back to me, but I'm assuming it wasn't favorable because he did not invest in his second floor. Also, I'll just add that in Augusta, where also all sorts of redevelopment has been happening, there are more floors, so there's greater ROI. And in Skowhegan, there's just one floor above the retail space. And so you have to, that takes a long time to get your return back. So just some comments from where we're at in Skowhegan.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And it's interesting. I have in the past used Skowhegan as an example of creative problem solving. One of the barriers you hear to reuse of the upper floors is the cost of an elevator and the requirement for an elevator. And what Skowhegan did was, there was a municipally owned building that either had or put in an elevator, and they allowed the adjacent buildings on either side. I guess I don't know if the doors connecting the buildings already existed or they created them. They were allowed to use the same elevator in order to bypass that problem. So, I mean, it's that kind of creativity that's going to make all the difference. The other thing, human nature, this isn't Mainers, this is human nature, is caution. And we need to honor that. People are often looking for someone who's done it in the same setting or a similar setting that they can then use as kind of a marker that it's going to work and move forward. That if there's one person who's able to figure out how to do it and show that it works, then the others are going to move forward. And sometimes what it takes is that one property owner who finds something different or is able to take the plunge or does some kind of market to know what that reuse is going to be ahead of time. I'd hate to see someone invest the money on spec and hope that it's going to come. But one property owner figuring out how to do it could be the tipping point so that more people try it. And I saw something in the comment, but it disappeared, about the bankery. Is that an example of what went well?
Yeah, sure. The bankery is a great example of a building that is serving its full potential in Skowhegan. So for sure. And I agree with you. I think that in Skowhegan, it's a pretty conservative community where taking a leap of faith like that is hard for a lot of our property owners. So and we have some redevelop or some investment that's happening downtown with Bigelow Brewing's purchase of the mill building, and Maine Grains is working on get a new project called Land and Furrow, where they're going to redevelop the site of the old KVI. So we've got some stuff happening, which I hope will be more of a like a snowball effect. But it's just unfortunate to see those spaces that are already built and sitting in our downtown and just not being used.
No, absolutely. And Jeff, I saw something fly by in the comments about TIFs to address these kinds of things.
Yeah, some of the towns that we've worked with, they have either a downtown district TIF, or you can use a municipal TIF, and you can set up either facade, that's what they use it for, facade improvements, which can either be a loan or a grant, and some sort of a ratio of homeowner investment with a match for the grant.
And I think what we're hitting on here is this is one of those opportunities where it's got to be a public-private partnership, that in order to get the smart growth outcomes that you want of this vibrant downtown that more people want to be at, and it gives you the diversity, it gives you a stronger tax base and all of that, sometimes you've got to put in some public resources. And you're part of the Maine Downtown Center, the Main Street program, and that's the best thing going when it comes to downtowns. But continuing to look at redevelopment of our existing buildings is one of the smartest things we can do, again, for the trifecta of what it does for the community, what it does for the economy. And when I talk about smart growth, I will say my shorthand for it is it's the place where downtown revitalization and farmland conservation come together. Those things should never be seen as competing with each other. But when the downtowns are the cool, affordable, safe place to be, it pulls pressure off of the hay fields. And it also creates customers for the farmers if they're doing retail projects. So being able to make the downtowns cool and affordable also is a way to make sure that the people who are using your open space to earn their living, having farmed for almost 20 years, I'd like to take an opportunity to remind people farms are small businesses. There's a great balance there in being able to achieve both of those goals when you do downtown revitalization, and it's worth some public skin in the game to make it happen.
Hey, Nancy, I have another quick question. So going back to your comments about elevators, it brought to mind building codes more generally. One of the things I learned about and I really appreciated was how some states, specifically, I'm thinking of New Jersey, have passed specific building codes for rehabilitation. Is that something that Maine's considered, or that something you think could be a possibility in the state of Maine?
My understanding, I was in the legislature when the statewide, Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code passed, and it's been changed I think every 2 years since then, is that what we did was bring them all into one code. So the rehab code is a part of MUBEC. They're integrated, and it is a separate code within that. There are changes proposed this year with MUBEC. What I've seen so far is the changes relate to energy efficiency, allowing maybe raising, what's it called, a stretch standard, I think is now in place, so that if a town wants to require higher energy efficiency in their new construction, they're allowed to. So there's flexibility while keeping it, again, the Uniform Building Code was a huge win because it provides that consistent regulatory environment when the bill came before the legislature, I remember hearing, the lumberyards were saying, we become the de facto building code enforcement officer for every town, because when someone comes in and says, we're going to build a deck or we're going to build an addition, what do I need? The first question is, where do you live? I need to know what your building code is. So we took that barrier away. And then again, enforcement depends on the size of the community. There are ways to do different enforcement. So the value is there in uniformity. And again, it should continue to adapt as what we do adapts. But specific to your question, I believe the rehab code is built right into the MUBEC. And again, anything we can do to encourage the reuse of existing buildings, whether it's the codes, the ordinances, the uses that we allow, is going to be good on, it's the trifecta: environment, economy, and community. Kate, what else are we seeing in the chat? I see 41 of them since I've clicked on it last.
Yes, I didn't want to, good conversation. I didn't want to come in there on that. Some more on Winslow specifically from Erica, that it has no downtown. So creating a community center to focus on it is very hard. Downtown redevelopment has been hugely successful all over the country and brings people in with shops, restaurants, loft apartments, etc., but it's not available to us. We need new ideas for community gathering spaces. We have Fort Halifax, which is underutilized, but there's nothing around it.
I would love to dive into that with you. That's fascinating. When we talk about downtowns, and if I didn't make the point, that's my error, and I'll fix it now. Downtowns can be a city. It can be Skowhegan that we're talking about. It can also be a village center. You know, I live in Monmouth. I'm on Main Street. Somebody made fun of me once because I said I live in downtown Monmouth. It's like, well, there isn't actually. It's more of a village center. But these principles can work if you've even got a village center as a starting point. And if Fort Halifax is a potential starting point, if there's already a reason for people to gather there that makes sense, then we could have conversations about what do you do? What are again, it comes to that housing choices for a well-rounded community. What are the tools that are available? And then what is your goal? And then strategizing which of those tools make sense for you to come into first, so that you can keep moving forward. And again, I'll say every time you're introducing a change, make sure that the community has plenty of opportunity to hear more about it, to express their concerns, to have them addressed early on. It just makes sense. It's amazing when I'm seeing the power of Facebook. If you've got a project going on, create a Facebook page for it and invite people to come to it. And that's where information can get out, and you can advertise different meetings about it and that sort of thing.
Excellent comments. I had someone had mentioned in there that TIFs seem like they're too big for the local shop owner. That's something that we can help with, is to help them identify the opportunity for a TIF and to explain what that is to the town manager, the select board. Once it's put into place, that's probably the heavy lifting, is to actually do that. And that's when you have a real estate piece of property that they have incremental value over and above the baseline. And that's what the town captures and utilizes for additional sources of expenditures. Like I said, facade improvements, business type of grants. But once it's in place, the paperwork for the shop owners shouldn't be as difficult as you're thinking. So I'm happy to answer any questions or go off another opportunity to call me, and we'll see if we can figure out another way to do it.
And Jeff, you've been advertising a brand new revolving loan fund for small businesses, if I remember right.
You know what? That's a perfect segue, and that was not planned.
No.
We do. No, excellent. We do have, and I will turn it over to Will and Robin. There are resilience coordinators, and we have a brand new revolving loan fund that I would love for them to talk about. Good job. So Robin or Will or both?
Sure, I've talked a little bit. Robin, do you want to take this, or do you want me to take it?
Hi, sure, I can. Yeah, so we do have a new revolving loan fund, and This fund was awarded to us as part of the CARES Act of 2020. In fact, it was the EDA supplemental grant that provided funds to economic development districts to give ready access to funds for struggling businesses. Now, this is very similar to the revolving loan funds that KVCOG and other councils of government do currently offer as a financial product. However, it does take away three key requirements that are stipulated in some of those other programs. The first one is that the interest rate does not have a minimum floor. So loans can be made with as low as a 0% interest rate. The second thing is that you don't have to put up a piece of collateral. I mean, you don't have to have your leveraged capital. And then the third is that you don't have to demonstrate that there is no other credit available. Many of our revolving loan funds offer gap funding for businesses that may not qualify for traditional financing, and therefore they come to us for those types of needs. This type of product is designed to rapidly respond to businesses that are looking to meet a new need in the community as a result of the coronavirus. They're trying to expand, create new jobs, or they have a need that they need to meet in order to keep going and to retain jobs. So if you're interested, it looks like the website is up here that Kate has put. Send us an email at loans@kvcog.org if you have any questions. Yeah, but it's a good product to meet this need for gap financing.
Excellent, thank you. I just wanted to plug that in while we had an opportunity, and I think if it's brand new, I think they rolled it out in February, so there's a fair amount of funding available. So I would ask everybody on this webinar meeting to share that with your town, share it with your chambers of commerce, your business associations, libraries, whoever, because it's a great opportunity. And as Robin said, the stipulations have been removed to get the funding out, to keep people afloat and to move forward in their businesses.
So Jeff and Robin and Will, as an idea on that, listening to that while thinking about Skowhegan, is there potential, or what do you think of the idea of maybe pulling together some of those business owners in Skowhegan and talk specifically about the barrier that they see to fully utilizing their buildings, and this as one potential tool to get there that's, you know, time sensitive. This is new. This is a kind of like finding something on sale. You want to get it when you can. And that if there was a coordinated conversation rather than competing with each other, that it may be a way to actually hit more of those goals for Skowhegan because the business members are working together. And I'm using Skowhegan as an example simply because of the conversation, but coordination of businesses that are allies, even though perhaps competitors as well, to take advantage of something like this can be what sets the downtown or the area onto the next level.
That's a really interesting thought, Nancy. A couple of weeks ago when we rolled out the RLF, we did have an informational session, and we had Christian Savage from up there on the call. And it's interesting that you would mention this collaborative approach, because I know that Will and I have been looking for ways to insert resilience in our resilience work with KVCOG. And so we were offering this financial product thinking about individual businesses rather than thinking about a selection of businesses that may identify either, you know, they are within the same building, like you mentioned, or they are the same type of business, to be able to access a financial resource like this and make an even bigger impact in the community if they're using it, say, all for the same type of thing. So they're all, you know, renovating their building in some form or fashion. I like the idea. I think that we could move with that further and kind of noodle that around a bit.
Cool, that's exciting.
And I think that's one of the opportunities when you have several businesses co-located because they can support each other and they become an entity as a destination place over and above the individual businesses. So they do have a different flexibility when you collaborate with your neighbors in business.
Cool.
Will, did you want to mention anything else about resilience or the loan fund or anything? I'll give you a final shot.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I'll mention, I know Christina knows about this because she also put in an application. We're working on a grant fund through the Boston Federal Reserve called the Working Communities Challenge. And I'm helping to pilot a program in Southern Kennebec County that's specifically looking at housing. And so Nancy has graciously offered to help us with that. But our intention is to try to both address some of the acute needs, but also more of the systemic and like policy-based issues that we have with housing. And I only mention it to say that there's a lot of work that needs to get done, and we're not the only place in the country that's working to solve some of these problems. But I'm really optimistic that this could be an opportunity to pilot a few different experiments to see what works and to use that as a sort of tested way to get more funding to address some of these issues.
Excellent, thank you. Any more questions or any more comments for Nancy or any of the KVCOG team? Excellent, and I think, Kate, can you tell us how we're going to be able to get the recording of this if we want to share this with others?
Absolutely. So we will have this up on our YouTube channel, KVCOG's YouTube channel, which you can see a link to on the current slide that's being shared. That should be up tomorrow. And at the same time, we will email everyone who is currently registered for this event with a link to that. We will also share it on our Facebook page. And I believe that Nancy said that she will be sharing it on the GrowSmart's Facebook page as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nancy, any final comments?
This has been fabulous. Number one, I'm glad that we all have the internet and power to be able to enjoy this. Since we've got a minute, one of the ways that we do our advocacy is through the Maine Broadband Coalition. You can find mainebroadbandcoalition.org. One of our most recent current tools is speed testing. Right on the home site, you can click on the speed test and you can find out what your up and down speeds are. But what it's also doing is crowdsourcing what broadband we currently have available in the state. It's been hard to get that information from providers. So mainebroadbandcoalition.org, join. It's free to join there and find out the advocacy work that we're doing now. There's a substantial bond issue coming, or it'll be part of the governor's package to do a bond on that. Do the speed test. It's a great way. You can do it multiple times during different times of the day, because you can see how that varies with what's going on in your house and what your neighbors are doing as well. But it helps Connect Maine crowdsource that information as we move forward to make sense, to know where to make those public investments to match the private sector.
I just made a comment. I agree. I'm working with a few towns. And one of the things we need to do is to get this kind of data so that we can share it with the ISPs and with Connect Maine Authority. So I encourage everybody to do a speed test, do several of them. The thing that's interesting is you do the speed test and it's going to capture yours. But also is if you're not able to have internet or to do a speed test, there's a way to make that known and you become a black spot on the map, and that helps them to recognize the places where there are no broadband capabilities. So it can work a number of different ways.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to go ahead and close it out. I thank everybody for being here this long. I think the bad weather helped it. Be safe if you go out anywhere, and we will be having another quarterly meeting, and stay tuned for that. And we look forward to meeting you. Give us calls or questions, emails if you're interested in the revolving loan fund, GrowSmart questions, or how KVCOG can help with TIF or housing. That's what we're here for, and I'm greatly appreciated. Excellent conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
All righty.